Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Kevin McAvey, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I am actually in Bedford, New York right now. I've been a resident of New York 17 for probably around 8-9 years now, but I've been a New York resident since I was born down on Long Island. It's really a pleasure to be here and actually get the opportunity to talk with many of our candidates who are running in New York 17 and talk about issues that are important to everyone in our district, including healthcare. There's a lot going on at the federal level right now, as I'm sure you've heard, because you can't turn on the TV right now without hearing more about it. And I'd like to talk a little bit about it to start, before bringing on Beth Davidson, who I'm so pleased is joining us today. First, a little bit about me. It's always really important, and I think it's actually probably never more important than today, to know who your messengers are, who you're actually speaking to, who you're hearing information about. So, hi. I'm Kevin McAvey. I live in Bedford, New York. I'm so lucky to have an amazing, wonderful wife and 3 children here. But my journey has been a long one, and one very involved in public policy for a very long time. I started out in going to school in upstate New York, and then ultimately down in DC, where I had the pleasure of working on the Hill for then Senator Clinton, and getting to see firsthand how policies made to improve the lives of New Yorkers from Buffalo to Albany to Long Island and New York City are made. How important it is to listen to individuals where they are, wherever that may be, and then help them think through and represent them. And when we're thinking about solutions. I've done federal contracting in DC for USDA and HUD from there. I helped then to set up a state independent healthcare data agency in our adjacent state of Massachusetts. And then I came back home to New York, where I'd been the past 9 years, working in New York City and living in northern Westchester as part of a nation-leading healthcare consultancy. But here today, I'm here as a private citizen, worried about where we're headed as a country, but knowing that when we have the right vision together, we can find a path forward for that works for everyone. I think there's no more important time for us to really think about where we are and where we're going than today. So, as many of you have been aware of this week, the One Big Beautiful Bill passed the U.S. House of Representatives. There's been a lot of conversation about this online, and I've been talking about it on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok over the past few months. If you're not following me, please do, and do follow the candidates who we're going to be speaking with. But this bill is nothing short of extraordinarily ambitious and severe in how it changes and sets out to change our country if passed. It has to go through the Senate next and then come back to the House to reconcile changes and then ultimately go to the president's desk for signature. It's an expansive bill, over 1,100 pages, proposing sweeping reforms to our nation's tax system and federal social service programs. And it passed by one vote. That vote could very well be pinned on our representative right now, Congressman Mike Lawler. The One Big Beautiful Bill includes major reforms, and too much to talk about in any one session, and hopefully we'll unpack more and more as we talk over the course of the coming weeks. On the revenue side, it makes the Trump 2027 tax cuts permanent. Again, the majority of these revenues, like revenue enhancements, these take-home pay will go to our wealthiest Americans. It raises the SALT and local tax deduction, which is great. It doesn't help me forget the fact that the first Trump administration and Republicans in Congress got rid of that deduction to begin with, penalizing Californians and New Yorkers alike. It reduces tip taxation. It cuts green energy tax credits. And it includes new taxes on private university endowments, which I'd love to talk about at another time. Spending reforms include Medicaid reforms, which we're going to talk about more today. Supplemental nutrition assistance program reforms. It reduces federal support for tuition and student loans and increases federal defense spending, providing additional funding to advance the administration's immigration and border priorities. This is a great graphic, and it's probably hard to see on your screen depending upon how big your screen is. But there are, like the Wall Street Journal 2 days ago released a really accessible graphic that shows where tax dollars are going and where spending cuts are coming from. The one point I'll actually just kind of pull out here is that big white box. So whenever anyone, which is actually for deficit increases, so whenever anyone's talking about fiscal responsibility when it comes to this bill, that's very misleading and very disingenuous. This bill will actually increase our deficit and our debt over time. Again, there's a lot in this bill and a lot to talk about and focus on. And our like Beth Davidson will be here and be able to kind of unpack some of it with us. But first, I'd like to talk about our healthcare reforms and what it means specifically to New York. Key healthcare reforms include increasing eligibility enrollment requirements, ultimately cutting up to $670 billion or more from our healthcare system in this country just from the Medicaid reforms alone. And it starts with making it harder to get eligible and enroll in Medicaid. It introduces new work reporting requirements. Think of this as adding to the paperwork burden for folks who are already mostly working and who are just trying to get access to healthcare, the ability to see a doctor when sick. It's basic values, and yet it seems like as we're trying to make additional hurdles again and again for those people to get access. It delays new modernization, federal eligibility and enrollment rules. It streamlines processes to get people who are eligible for Medicaid on Medicaid, and it requires more paperwork more frequently. Think about this as not only requiring more paperwork, but now instead of doing it once a year, you have to do it twice a year. And for any of us who have directly or have had a family member or someone in our close network been enrolled in Medicaid, in which I think the statistics are more than half of Americans are in that situation, you know it's not you don't get on Medicaid by the trust system. It requires a significant amount of paperwork. These reforms also eliminate the ability for states to allow lawfully present immigrants, green card holders, refugees to get access to coverage. And if the state even decides to do that with their own dollars, based upon the values of the state, the federal government will penalize that state and all of its residents for making those decisions. The one big beautiful bill would impact New York significantly and disproportionately, making it that much more confusing why many of our representatives, Republican representatives exclusively, voted for it. The State Department of Health estimates that nearly 1.5 million New Yorkers will lose access to healthcare coverage because of this bill. There'll be losses of $13.5 billion annually to our state and its healthcare system, including $10 billion in federal cuts to support New York's healthcare system itself. This is the system that every New Yorker depends on. And imagine taking dollars out of that system. It's going to result in either, to the extent markets allow, providers needing to try to find revenues elsewhere, thinking about how to get cost increases to stay whole, or reducing access to services, neither of which serves the rest of New York whole. Nevertheless, folks who need healthcare to go to work, to be strong members of their community, and who no longer have it. Medicaid cuts impact everyone. And all of this within the context of New York continues virtually every year to contribute more to the federal coffers, to our federal budget, to our federal spending that goes to other states across the country than it gets back in return. And now we're going to be getting back even less. So with that, I am so pleased to be able to welcome my colleague and friend, Beth Davidson, to this live stream. Beth, it's so nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for having this conversation. It's really, really important. It's going to affect so many people here in the 17th Congressional District and in Rockland County, where I live in particular.
Yeah, so Rockland County, that's kind of where your journey starts, right?
Yep.
I would love, and by the way, for those who don't know Beth, Beth was one of the first candidates to announce her run against Congressman Mike Lawler earlier this year. Beth, you are a Rockland County legislator where you chair the Environment Committee and Task Force on Water Resource Management. You're vice chair of the Housing and Economic Development Committee. You were previously a 2-term Nyack School Board member. You've been an active community leader on your synagogue in Leadership Rockland, the Soar Mentorship Program, the Children's Shakespeare Theater, and you're a resident in Nyack with your wonderful family, husband, and 2 amazing children. Did I get that? And dog. There you go.
Sorry, he's my favorite child right now. The only one who's always happy to see me.
So maybe we could start out at the beginning, because I would like to get into policy and healthcare. But could you talk to me a little bit about your journey here and what actually if you're building up to the moment when you decided I need to throw my hat in and actually run?
Sure, and thanks for asking that. So I've lived in Rockland County for 20 years. I've spent almost half of that in public service. Prior to that, and still currently, I've always worked on the other side of the political equation, working for candidates around the country. My first job out of college was for an organization called Emily's List, where I worked over the next 2 decades, first as a staffer and then as a freelance writer to elect, probably more than 100 at this point, Democratic women to different offices around the country. I worked on a couple of campaigns and then really settled here in Rockland County in 2005. And really, the way my family raised me is you just dive into a community and roll up your sleeves and get to work. And so I did that in many of the volunteer capacities you've already mentioned. And then after Donald Trump was elected, I decided to run for school board. That was where I thought I could make the most immediate difference for my children, and proudly served 2 terms there. County legislative seat opened up. It was a very purple district. And because I knew how to run and win, I was asked to run there. And I actually led a slate of Democrats to win the first Democratic supermajority in Rockland County history on our county legislature. So very proud of that. Very, very proud of the work I'm already doing on the legislature to provide tax relief, but also pass common sense gun safety reform. I've preserved hundreds of acres of open space in my capacity as the environmental chair, working currently to build new housing on the site of an abandoned county building that's been on sort of sitting derelict for years, and we're finally going to get that developed, called the Sane Building. For anyone from Rockland who's watching, we're going to get that turned into housing and really, continue to move this beautiful county forward. And because of all of these factors, and because of my experience and my, true love for this community and this district, and my belief that government can and should still work together and collaboratively as possible to make our lives better for those we serve. And I've served, very successfully in divided government here in Rockland, and there's no reason we can't do that in Washington, D.C. And that's why I'm running to make a difference, to look for common ground and serve the people in our district, which our current congressman is not doing, especially as exemplified by his deciding vote on yesterday's, what I'm calling the bloated, brutal budget.
There it is.
Hurt our community.
Yeah. Well, I do want to talk about the OBBB in a moment, but even working on the school board, I assume that it requires you. I mean, I imagine it grounds you in just what are the everyday needs, taking us out of politics and really thinking about folks need solutions. How do we get there? Is that right? And were there any particular examples from your school board experience where you just kind of had to kind of make something happen and actually deliver for your community?
Of course. I mean, the instance and school board members, we oversee, it's no small task. We oversee,
Mhm.
some of us $100 million plus budgets,
Mhm.
responsible for hiring the superintendent, who then hires the rest of the staff, overseeing, contract negotiations, overseeing, the hiring that, we don't go through and like mark up the curriculum, but certainly make suggestions and hire the folks that we think will implement those curricula in the way
Mhm.
that we think aligns with our community's values. But, I think what every school board member who served during COVID will point to were the unique challenges that were thrown at us immediately, while many of us, while we're trying to care for
Yeah.
our own children who are suddenly all stuck at home. And I'll never forget, it was, the day that we were sort of getting the call that our schools were going to close the next day, and mad scramble for, getting technology to everyone, making sure every kid could log on, that the teachers, and honestly, because we had been doing digital learning for so long, our teachers were pretty well prepped. Everyone already had Google Classroom.
Mhm.
The kids were used to being on devices, working in our learner active technology infused Laddie classrooms. And so it was it was pretty seamless from a technology standpoint. But I remember just picking up the phone and calling Nyack Center, our local community center, and saying, how are the kids going to eat tomorrow?
Yeah.
We have 42% of Nyack public school kids rely on free breakfast and lunch
Mhm.
every day at school.
Yeah.
And so they said, we read each other's minds, come over at 9 a.m. tomorrow and we're going to figure it out. So it's, day one of the pandemic, and we're calling Aramark, our food service provider, and basically built a whole system to have, kids come in, 6 feet separation, the whole shebang, to come in and get their meals. And we packed them in advance. We got in at like 7 a.m. and packed them every day. And then when I started seeing sort of the quality, and this is not a knock on Aramark, they
Yeah.
were trying to, build the plane while they flew it also.
Yeah.
I said, this is not going to keep families going. And so then we started building a food pantry from scratch as well, so that when kids came to get their lunches, they could get, food for the rest of the day or for the weekend. And then we pulled in our local bakery, donated brioches every day. I set up a sign up, and drove around literally picking up stuff off people's porches. And we put together, an entire room turned into basically a food pantry for families to tell us what they needed. And we'd get them rice, beans, whatever would get them through the weekend. And so that's, above and beyond what,
Yeah.
is typical of a school board member, but that's what I saw my role as doing, because having kids in school and knowing who those kids were, I knew that we needed to act fast to make sure that they had enough to survive.
That's an incredible story, and like what it kind of brings me to is when we think about our public servants and our representatives, the folks that we're going to hire to represent us, is the crises of today are not going to be the crises of tomorrow.
That's right.
And so I'm always thinking about like how can we pick individuals to represent us that have kind of the moral compass and like who reflect our values, and yet who are also able to like understand the needs of our community and get things done. And I think that's a nice little encapsulation. And have you kind of seen that happen at the county legislature already?
I mean, I think it's incumbent and helpful on for our public leaders to be very immersed
Mhm.
and involved in the communities that they serve. I mean, I knew that would be a problem for our kids because I was a Girl Scout leader. And so
Mhm.
I knew a lot of our children and families. I was part of the PTA. I worked on our international night. I worked intentionally with communities that were not necessarily, in my immediate circle, so that I would understand their needs. And that's certainly what I've continued to do on the county legislature. Not just think about how this policy or that policy would affect my immediate circle, but, this is a very diverse county.
Yeah.
And so I'm already thinking about, our vibrant Haitian communities with temporary protected status being revoked.
Mhm.
I'm thinking about our disability community that I've become very involved with since becoming a county legislator, how
Mhm.
they're going to be impacted by these Medicaid cuts. And, if you want to hear directly from one, I can, phone my friend Katie Sanchez at any point during this live stream. She's been texting me since yesterday,
Mhm.
since the bill passed, very concerned about what these cuts could mean for her ability to live independently, for her, she's part of an employment program, for the care that she receives and the therapy she receives and the support that her family receives. So again, and she and I met because I served on the race committee for the Women's Distance Festival, which is the largest all women's 5K in the tri-state area that benefits the Center for Safety and Change, our local domestic violence shelter. So all I'm saying, and that just brings it back to like, be very involved in your community, and you'll have a better understanding for what they need because you've built those relationships.
And it sounds like you first ran for office, like the school board, because of a moral imperative when President Trump was elected the first time.
Yeah.
And then the second time, were the same impulses driving you to run? And how did you make that decision? Because it's not without sacrifice, right? Like campaigning is, I don't know if it's a time and a half or a 2-time job. I mean, it's a big undertaking.
It is. I mean, so running for county legislature in part was because there's only 3 women on our entire county legislature. I have 17 members, and one of them was retiring. That was my predecessor, Harriet Cornell. And she really wanted it to be a woman. And so I was part of a committee, looking for folks and made a few phone calls. And it just, everyone kept pointing back to me that you already represent a large chunk of this district. And you're also the kind of person who will be strategic enough to help us put together this winning slate to win a Democratic supermajority so that we can have, a heavier hand in decision making when it comes to the budget and to, policies that impact our entire county. So, leading a bigger effort definitely appealed to me versus just, running for myself. And you'll see me running like that at the congressional level too. I'm, going out this weekend, weather permitting. I think we might get bad weather tomorrow, but to bring volunteers to knock doors for some of the local candidates in Westchester, because local races are so important and often people don't, pay as much attention. So that's my plan in this congressional campaign, is to absolutely lead a movement based on issues like the ones we're going to talk about today to help win races up and down the ticket and deliver for our families.
And it is a sacrifice to kind of go and actually run for Congress, particularly in a district like NY17, which is so competitive and is going to be kind of in the spotlight nationally. It's raising money, it's engaging locally, it's engaging more than locally, like being across the region seemingly all at once. Like, how did you kind of make that decision with your family and with your close network, and how has it been? Like, I know that you've been all over.
Well, it was, I did know what would be involved because I've worked on both sides of the equation. As I've said, I'm, very close with our former congressman, spent a lot of time campaigning with him. But it is different when it's yourself. And while, we can think of it as a sacrifice, and it certainly is a lot of time and a lot of time away from my family, although they're always welcome to join me on any and all campaigning events. I'll say sometime about the time I made my son continue knocking a list with me after a bee stung him, because the data disappears if you stop mid-list. Here's a bottle of cold water. You'll be fine. But to me, it's a promise. It's a promise that I'm making to the voters that I will put my very best foot forward to make sure that if they put their trust in me, whether that's donating $5 or, voting for me in the primary, or endorsing me, or, knocking doors for me, or putting any piece of themselves, of their own personal stamp on me, that I will, do my very best and put forward the, 110%, as we would say, when I was a waitress, every day. And that's, how I get up every day, thinking about, I wake up around 4 a.m. starting to think about what I have to do during the day, and how I can best deliver the best campaign day I can, so that when we get to, whether it's next June or whether next November, I left nothing on the field or everything on the field. I can't remember which the sports metaphor is, but that I, I'm not ceding a single vote. I'm not ceding a single door, a single phone call. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done that if I weren't ready to make that commitment.
Yeah. And so, like, do you have a count now, or an estimate of like how many living rooms you've been in Westchester and Rockland and Putnam and?
So about 3 or 4 in Putnam, 4 or 5 in Nyack, in Rockland. I mean, I just know Rockland better. So I've really been focused on Westchester, and probably at least 20, 25. Yeah. I'm in a different living room every night, sometimes too. So I was in.
I have to ask, Like, I mean, I always feel uneasy going into a new person's house generally. Like, are there any like tips, like the things to do, things not to do when you're entering into someone's home?
I was asked if I should take off my shoes because
Uh-huh.
we're a shoes off house here
Uh-huh.
ourselves. But it's the hosts always make me feel so comfortable. It's
Mhm.
really lovely. I really haven't had a moment of anxiety going into anyone's home. We're there because they've welcomed me.
Mhm.
I just make sure that I'm prepared and put my best foot forward and ready to answer, questions which are different, depending on where I am and what the crowd is and what the interests are. And I always just find it really helpful. There are no wrong questions. If I don't know the answer, I'm quite honest and say, I haven't heard about that yet. I'll get back
Yeah.
to you because so many issues are hyper localized as they should be.
Yeah.
And so many are similar between, our 4 counties in this district. So um, I'm eager and grateful for the chance to learn from every living room in which I step.
So I want to hear, we're going to talk a little bit about healthcare in a minute, but like, what are the issues that people are thinking about, like around kitchen tables? Because I really think as a party, that's where we need that is our space.
Mhm.
Historically, that's been our space. Like, what are you hearing from across the district of issues of greatest concern to like our district household from Westchester, Rockland, Putnam?
I mean, the biggest thing is affordability.
Mhm.
It's too expensive to live here for most people.
Mhm.
In terms of, housing costs, healthcare costs, childcare costs, and, there just isn't enough childcare when we look at, what was the promise of universal pre-K years ago is far from universal. There's very limited number of lottery slots available in most school districts, and that would make a huge difference to so many
Yeah.
families to have, before and after school care, to have pre-K and 3K, as they're now calling it, options. So that's something I'm very focused on, but it's really all connected under an umbrella of affordability and also making sure that people feel safe in the spaces where they are. To try not to get emotional, but it's been very difficult the last 2 days after 2 Jewish people just starting out their lives
Sorry.
together were gunned down. This
Yeah.
brings together all my top issues and all my biggest fears in terms of gun safety is something that drives my public service every day, and gun safety reforms. And, just the ability to feel safe in our spaces based on an international conflict that so many of us feel is going in the wrong direction, and is a travesty all around. And so that's, and I made sure to reach out to our local law enforcement and thank them for, really being extra vigilant and taking care of us because it's not fair that anyone should feel unsafe being in the spaces where they are. So whether it's, you feel like there's not enough police presence where you live, or whether you're, a mom putting your kids on the bus every day, worrying about, whether or not they're going to come home, to whether, your child commutes into New York City or lives in New York City and you're concerned about their safety on the subway. These issues all converge in a way that just creates anxiety. And it's really twinned with that economic anxiety to make us feel, we want to feel like the Hudson Valley is the very best, safest, most beautiful, most communal place to raise our families. And I feel like we have some work to do to get there. And that's what I'm committed to doing through this campaign and through my current role as a county legislator.
How do we get there? I know, I mean, we're gonna have plenty of time to talk about like the specific policy proposals, but big picture as a country, I really do believe that we've started to lose our moral compass. Like, what does it take to get us back, and what does that look like? Do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I have to work in a bipartisan way. I
Mhm.
don't really have a choice,
Yep.
and that's my job. We
Mhm.
have a Republican county executive. We have Republican town supervisors. I was just with my local town supervisor today. So grateful that he always includes me and welcomes me to celebrations in the town of Clarkstown and the same in the town of Orangetown and all of our 5 towns around the county.
Yeah.
And working on the county legislature as part of a supermajority, we work collaboratively with our Republican county executive. And
Mhm.
I think what I aim every day to prove is that if you lead with respect and collaboration and focus on results,
Mhm.
not what am I going to get? What are you going to get? What are the people we represent going to get?
Mhm.
that we really can accomplish good things for people. And we already have all the accomplishments that I mentioned before, and then some. And so if we can do that in Rockland County, which, many consider to be, a really red place. But Rockland is very representative of the rest of the state, actually. So it's and so is my own county legislative seat, district, which has, people of all walks of life, in every kind of background, religion, occupation. And so, I think that's a really good place to be running this race from, and with the understanding that it's in that collaboration and common ground that we move forward. And on a national level, it does feel, it can feel bleak, but it starts with each of us, right? Reaching out to a neighbor, coming on, on Zooms like this, on podcasts that aren't necessarily, normally in your iPhone, but, reach out and listen to a different point of view. That's what I've always done. I'm kind of old school that way. And I think why I've been successful in my races, so far. And, starting with school board, which is nonpartisan, to take it back to that, you can't win on your party, you win on your ideas.
No.
And that's the mindset I bring. And I think breaking out of our media bubbles is challenge number one. And it's going to sound wonky, but we need serious voting reforms. It's gerrymandering that of districts that has driven the parties to such extremes that it gets harder and harder to find common ground and compromise.
And I mean, going back to your school board example, it really helps when we know who we're serving and keep them in mind in our decision making, because then a lot of the political push and pull and tug, it does sort of kind of fade away when we're very solely focused on actually serving people and addressing their needs.
And I'm going to pay our current congressman a compliment in that his staff, I just saw a member of his staff last night at an event that I was attending in honor of my daughter's service to the YMCA Youth and Government Program. He's very present, and his staff are very present and accessible. And I do think that's important. And I'll extend him that compliment on his constituent service. Yeah.
So healthcare. So this is something that I think I would bet if you poll everyone in our district, 80% of them will probably list it as a concern in their top 3 or 5 concerns. Some for many, it's number 1. For others, it's further down the list. Some are directly on Medicaid and could be impacted by these cuts. Some are receiving health insurance especially if they're legally present immigrants, through our essential plan in New York. But even for the rest of our state, healthcare affordability is a consistent concern for individuals and employers. When you see your premiums go up 10% a year and your salary is only going up 5%, or if you're lucky, or 3%, and it just starts to press on what's left over for you to bring home, it's a problem. And it's been a problem that's been going on for a long time. And I don't think the solution to that is actually taking away coverage from people. And ultimately, that's what this bill is going to do. What are you hearing about healthcare from your conversations with folks across the district? And what do you think of the bill?
So healthcare is, you're right, one of the most important issues in everyone's life, particularly as it impacts the costs in the rest of your life. And as you and I have talked about in the past, I come at this from a very personal place. I've had thyroid cancer twice, 2 ensuing surgeries, and radioactive iodine that, took me out of the workforce for a little bit, prolonged our ability to start our family. Although, thank God we were successful after, IVF that was necessitated from that was not covered by our healthcare plan at the time. I think it's better for most folks now. So I know what it's like to fight with your insurance company. And I know that if the Affordable Care Act were to be repealed, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for me to get healthcare coverage, again, as a 2-time cancer survivor on the open market.
Yeah.
And so, thankfully I have my county coverage and, parts of my husband's coverage, but we're lucky that we have that, and that could go away if the Affordable Care Act were overturned.
Yeah.
And so there's both, the uncertainty that folks have who have pre-existing conditions, but it's not just the individual patients who are concerned. I've spoken with CEOs of our hospitals who are, very concerned that if they, Medicaid is cut and they're not seeing even those Medicaid payments, which already, as you know, are less than the payments they receive for insured patients, that we're going to start seeing, sort of the war zone emergency rooms of the, 1980s and 1990s. And because they will treat everyone, as you know, but, what does that look like for everyone else who, will have to wait longer for their care or be, turned away or, just not, or if they don't have that coverage at all, not even want to go. And so who's going to start prolonging and postponing their preventive care, and what outcomes is that going to cause, particularly in our already underserved communities? So that's a lot of what I'm hearing from every aspect of this district, whether it's those working in the healthcare field, those in the disability advocacy community, as I said, who, let's talk about work requirements.
Yeah. So let's talk about work requirements. So we could take a step back.
Yeah, let's take a step back and look at the bill.
Take a step back.
I'm skipping ahead.
No. This is an incredibly important issue, and I would love to kind of have a direct conversation about it. So work reporting requirements, or work requirements, as they're frequently framed by Republicans in Congress. The tagline is, if you're able to work, you should work in order to get benefits. And that does, honestly, for me, that seems reasonable. But the concern that I am consistently grappling with is that's a theoretical kind of statement that doesn't acknowledge how these requirements are actually put into practice. What work reporting requirements from experiences we've seen in Georgia and Arkansas and New Hampshire, it actually just creates more administrative paperwork for people who are already working and just struggling to get by. And so what you wind up seeing is folks getting pushed off the rolls, not because they don't meet the requirements, but because they can't meet the paperwork. This is like, how do you think about work reporting requirements, and how do you kind of grapple with this struggle that I think so many Americans are facing right now about, like, what is the truth, and how do I understand, like, whether this is a good move for our country or something that's going to be really detrimental?
Well, as you've pointed out, there's a decent stream of thought that they just don't work. And again, I keep going back to the disability advocacy community, who's, already has difficult time, getting employment. And so this is adding another stressor onto that. And, I'm looking at this Center on Budget Policy Priorities, and it, under all of the proposed work requirements, almost half of New Yorkers currently on Medicaid could see coverage loss if it's under the Arkansas model. And so is this really about, getting more people to work when we already have such a low unemployment rate? And, or is it just about getting people off the rolls, off the Medicaid rolls? And that's what it feels like to me. And I don't know if you feel differently.
No, I completely agree. And to your point, it ultimately ultimately hurts all of us, because it hurts the healthcare system writ large. It hurts access. But from the disability community, I know you mentioned your friend Katie Sanchez. Like, what is she seeing and hearing? What are the anxieties that she's hearing from the folks that she's working with?
Medicaid steps in and takes care of so much and it's different for every member of the community, obviously, whether it's helping with supportive housing, whether it's helping with, different occupational therapies or other therapies, whether it's helping she's able to work because of Medicaid. And so, and the assistance that her parents had the whole time she was growing up for the care that she needed. And so, I think she feels like she's in a bit of a house of cards, her whole community, that, if one card is pulled out, everything is going to come crashing down. And Medicaid has been a guarantee for that community that they've never really had to worry about before in the way that they do now. And so, She's been texting me since yesterday and shared, and for those of us who say that, for those not of us, for those who say that this is, just fear mongering, there's a reason that the ARC came out with the statement that they did yesterday, that, the House budget proposal would be disastrous in targeting not only Medicaid, but SNAP, which, is 39,000 people in New York 17 rely on SNAP benefits.
Yes.
It's hard to stay healthy when you don't have enough to eat.
Absolutely.
And so those two issues are really linked, and she's, concerned about that as well.
And that's something I would love for folks who are watching this to take away. I mean, look at the organizations and the individuals you respect in your community who are tracking these issues and hear what they have to say. For ones that are implicated in some of what we've been talking about today, the American Cancer Society released a statement last week noting that the Medicaid cuts are alarming. Quote unquote, no matter how it's packaged, cuts are cuts, and cuts have consequences. The so-called savings from Medicaid in this proposal will be paid for on the backs of individuals who often have no other option for affordable health insurance, including those with cancer. It is unconscionable to force states to cut healthcare coverage for cancer screenings, treatment, and access to innovative cancer therapies or nursing home care. The Greater New York Hospital Association, United Way of New York State, Civil Service Employees Association, Community Healthcare Association for New York State, 1199 SEIU. There are dozens of organizations that have come out to knowing and kind of working firsthand in the field to express their concern, both about then the proposed cuts and now the ones that are very real and going over to the Senate. So it feels sometimes overwhelming. I mean, even for us, and I wonder whether you feel this way, like, and for so many who are probably watching this or who will be watching this, what should they do? Like, what can an individual do? I think it's probably the question I get the most as we're kind of fellow travelers around the district. Like, what do you tell people? What should they do?
Well, those who are concerned should continue to reach out to their elected officials. I mean, it's not done until it's done. This bill still is going to move through the Senate, and pretty negative commentary from the senators I saw interviewed. I mean, we haven't also talked about the fact that, this is supposed to be the Congress of Fiscal and the Party of Fiscal Responsibility, and it balloons the budget by $3.7 trillion, mostly thanks to tax cuts for the ultra wealthy. And not even accounting for the fact that we don't have our full SALT state and local tax exemption restored here in New York, which is another cost factor for people.
Yes.
And especially in a certain income bracket, they relied on those SALT exemptions to help with their overall tax burden. And so it's just death by 1,000 cuts in terms of everything costing more, the tariffs making food cost more, healthcare getting more expensive, gas getting more expensive, home heating getting more expensive, and working with
Walmart and Target, like that costs are increasing. I mean, you see it. I mean, if you're paying attention to the prices of the food that you get in the grocery store, to the products that you're purchasing at some of these retailers, it's inevitable.
Yep. And so that's just adding one more problem is the fact that there's all these additional costs. So I would just say, keep reaching out to your elected officials. And take care of yourselves, I guess, the best you can now, right? I'm booking all my, appointments anyway to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And I hope everyone is doing that while they have the coverage to do it. I'm a mom. I'm always thinking 3 steps ahead. So that's what I would be doing if I had Medicaid coverage depended on that for my healthcare.
So I have 2 more questions for you, and then I'll let you go because I know you're going to be racing off to your next event. The first question is from our shared friend, Robbie Schleff, who had a question for you that she offered me to convey. How have you lifted people up in your career? Something that she believes is kind of a key attribute of a representative.
Sure. Well, just in politics alone, I'm always trying to get people to run. I believe that more a diversity of voices, that new voices are always really important. And so, in addition to, helping to recruit and help run the slate of candidates that I ran with for the county legislature, I recruited someone to run for Orangetown Board this year. People will tell you in Nyack, I've dropped school board packets off at their houses, get in and run for school board. We always, need people for these seats, and that public service is a noble calling, and that giving back to your community is in and of itself a reward. And I just, especially those that I've, met and engaged with and really grown up with over my life. And that includes as an adult. I will often be saying to people, a room is better for having your voice in it. So when you get frustrated, and when you feel like, when you're sitting in that endless meeting over a policy or over a budget change or over, a hiring or firing decision, and just getting so frustrated, just know that conversation is richer, and that room is more informed, and the outcome will be better because you were there. And so I do try to instill that in people, and I hope it's helpful. Maybe they leave the room cursing me at the end, but I think just trying to get people involved, and getting my own children involved and their children. That's really what I've tried to do in my life.
And I think it's a particularly timely and resonant message right now. I mean, it feels like, and for many I know, the best thing to do is just kind of detach, because I can't focus on what's going on. It's too much, and it doesn't align with who I believe we are and where we're going. But in fact, really, I think the solution, to your point, is the opposite. It is to get involved. It's to find a way, whether a meeting small or big, to get involved and share your voice and your values, no matter how frustrating the meeting, and to keep your cool and to be smart. And ultimately, important for our conversation, next November, to win. Beth, it's so wonderful that you, and I'm so appreciative that you joined me today for this conversation. My last question: if folks are interested in learning more about you or getting involved, how can they do that?
They could go to Beth Davidson for Congress, forcongress.com. I'm on all the social media platforms except Truth Social. But you can find me on Instagram. Oh, and I need to do TikTok, Kevin. You're going to have to teach me that.
Oh, no, I got it. I can't.
Instagram, X, Facebook. And, I'll just continue to say, I love this community. We have 20 summer fellows starting this, young people.
Holy moly.
In the summer. That's how we're going to be able to be supporting these other local campaigns. That to me is just really soul lifting, to know that young people are still excited and want to be involved. And going back to your previous question, let me just quickly also say that it's okay if you need to detach a little bit. Not everybody's like ready to get out there and go to a rally or just find a little, but if you can find the energy after, putting on your own mask in the airplane, right? If you can find the energy to extend beyond that, maybe it's going to a PTA meeting. Maybe it's, joining the lunchtime book club at your job, just finding your own space to engage and reach out and connect with someone else. That's how organizing starts. So you can always get bigger from there. So, that's how I got started, was just, being a Girl Scout leader and in my local PTA. But that being in community and working together and talking to each other is how we see our way through this.
Beth, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you, and it is a tremendous commitment to run for congressional office in particular. Thank you for being out there on the trail, listening to us, and helping to think about solutions for how we go forward.
Thanks for providing this platform so that everyone can hear what we have to say. I think it's really important. So thank you.
Soon. So we heard from Beth Davidson, really interesting conversation. It's just so wonderful to hear about individuals like her, like dedicating their lives and their Memorial Day weekends to listening to us, to actually getting involved in their local community, and ultimately seeking to represent us in office. So again, my name is Kevin McAvey. If you're not following me on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, I don't know what I'm doing. Just to level set. But I would love for you to join the conversation. I'm always aiming to provide facts about what is going on federally and locally, and help us refine our moral compass in a really challenging and often overwhelming time. Thank you for joining. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. You're the best.
That was great. Except I forgot to talk about Planned Parenthood, so that'll have